It's September 10th, 2016. Hello and welcome. My name is Brian McAvoy.
And I'm Tim Shank. This is episode 9 of Two Cyborgs and a Microphone, brought to you by Twin Cities Plus, creating an intelligent, capable, and resilient community.
Today, we're talking about safety and implant coatings.
If either of us are experts on that would be you, Brian.
Thanks.
What kind of coatings are on your implants?
Well, the implants I've got in my left hand are, starting with the first implant I got in my ring finger, is coated in medical-grade silicone. It's a magnet that's been plated in gold and then coated in silicone. The silicone's really the important one, because if that breaks, the gold is kind of that second line of defense, but I wouldn't rely on it. And magnets that are only coated in gold are usually considered not implant worthy, at least in the grinder community.
Until recently, I think, because I've seen people talking about gold-coated magnets and gold-coated implants.
Some people are keen on that. Some people think it's just an awful idea. I've actually talked to one guy who's had a magnet in his finger that has no special coatings, and he said his body just does not dissolve it. It's fine in there. He said it's still got full strength and everything. I would never recommend that.
Right. And most of the magnets, they have a nickel coating, and I think nickel is fairly biocompatible.
No. Oh, goodness, no.
No?
Nickel is what turns your skin green when you get cheap jewelry.
I thought that was copper.
I think copper will do something similar. Copper will turn green as it patinas. This guy is very fortunate that it just doesn't get dissolved in his body and introduce heavy metals, because neodymium, the magnet material, is a heavy metal, and it can do some bad stuff.
Right.
He's very lucky. Personally, if I just hold a paper clip too long, it will start to corrode. Gold, not so good. The next implant I got was an NFC implant, and those components are placed into a glass tube. The glass tube is borosilicate glass, usually known as Pyrex, so it's a very common item. Those tubes are filled with components, in this case the NFC chip and the antenna, and then it's sealed with a laser that just melts the glass over. I've heard of people using torches to seal them at home, but it gets a little tricky, but it is doable. The next implant I got was an RFID, which is just like the NFC. That one happens to be a smaller size. So these glass tubes, they come in all different sizes. The very last implant I got glows in the dark. It's called a firefly tattoo, and that's the largest diameter of all my implants. In fact, if I make a fist, it's pretty obvious where that one's placed. And then I also have a M31 magnet implanted in my index finger.
All right, and the N31, I have that one. Those are coated in titanium, right?
Actually, titanium nitride, which is
right.
just an alloy. Sometimes it's called ceramic. Sometimes those are also called ceramic coating. It's what's used on drill bits. If you see drill bits that have that kind of gold tint to them, that's titanium nitride.
Do you know anything about the process for putting titanium on an implant?
Titanium nitride coating is kind of neat. It can be done without extremely high temperatures, which is important because if magnets get exposed to high temperature, they'll lose some of their magnetism. I think the process is sputtering, where the particles are sent out and attracted to the item they're supposed to attach to. I'm not real familiar with the process, but that's the gist of it.
And the silicone, is that usually injection molded? How do they get the silicone to form a complete seal around an item?
If you're making a silicone mold, you're probably going to get better results than if you just gloop it on and try to shape it later. Because it's so flexible, it can really resist being shaped after it's cured. So even if you take something small like a magnet and coat it in silicone, medical grade silicone, by the way, I'm not talking about the stuff you use to seal up your bathroom. Don't use that stuff. Also, just a quick mention here, since we're talking about safety this episode, a lot of people will say Sugru is an acceptable implant coating. It is not.
Who says that?
Just don't even. People who just get into biohacking find the forum or watch the Left Anonym videos and go, oh, Left did it, it must be okay. It is not. That has since been proven very dangerous.
We're talking about, you said super glue, right?
Sugru, the moldable silicone goop that you buy in hardware stores or DIY stores.
I think, if anything, if the people listening can take away anything, do your research and don't take any chances with this. A magnet that starts dissolving into your body is definitely dangerous.
Yeah.
Anything like that, it can really cause problems.
If you aren't buying something that says medical grade on it, don't use it. Don't try to hack something together. And not all of these are expensive. You can honestly find pretty decent medical grade coatings on Amazon for under $20. And that's plenty to coat anything that you would consider putting in your body. Because there's things like epoxy, and those will usually cure and become very hard and rigid. There's also going to be the option to make an epoxy that's soft and cures to be flexible. And I think Amazon also has medical grade silicone.
Okay, and these are medical grade epoxies.
Yeah, they're medical grade.
Well, yeah, I have a lot of the same implants as you do, and mostly glass, titanium nitride coated. I've never had any problems, but I've seen some of the horror stories online.
Yeah, people have been mutilated. The level of mutilation I'm talking about is their finger looks ugly.
Yeah, something akin to an open sore, really.
And infection is a big deal. And that's part of the safety aspect of implanting something that's safe and done safely. One of the reasons for using implant-grade material is that it is not prone to fouling. If you get sugru, there's like cornstarch in that. Well, your body's just going to eat that up. Doesn't hurt your body to have a bunch of cornstarch in there. But now you've got little pits and grooves on the outside of your implant, and bacteria and gunk will foul it.
Speaking of pits and grooves, when I was asking about how you coat something in silicone, and I went to injection molding, I was imagining that was pretty much the only way to get a good, smooth surface. That if you were to use a liquid, use a silicone and dip the magnet or something like that, you're going to have pits and grooves that can cause problems. Is that not true with silicone?
I think it depends on the process. I'm not super familiar with it, and there are people on the biohack.me forum who are more familiar. In fact, I think there's even a coating specialist there. From what I've read, the mold method is definitely going to give you the best results. I have seen that there are techniques for buffing silicone after it's been cured, but it generally got a low chance of working.
And silicone's melting point is almost non-existent. I mean, it comes right before its burn point, doesn't it? I don't think you can melt silicone.
You're not going to melt silicone. If it's inside your body, your implant is not going to be your biggest concern.
Talking about before you put it in, so that if you wanted to coat something in silicone and then smooth it before implantation, that heat won't work for that.
No, heat would not work at all. It's not going to be like a wax or anything like that. It's going to be a mechanical abrasion. Well, another one we didn't talk about would be implant-grade stainless steel. That's not so much a do-it-yourself option unless you can order something that's been made out of stainless steel that you then put your technology into.
I don't think I've ever seen any of our type of implants, the DIY Cyborg stuff. I don't think I've seen any of those in stainless steel. Have you?
I haven't either.
Yeah, I think now that we're using titanium for everything like this, medical-wise, I think titanium is becoming the go-to. But I've also heard about gold, and that gold is very biocompatible.
I think rhodium, too, now that I think about it. One of the advantages of gold is it can be electroplated. However, you can't get a real thick coating of gold done properly. If you try to electroplate over and over and over, you're going to get it flaking at the end, I believe. And then you end up with a bad layer and you don't want to use it. One thing I thought was really cool is at CES this year, CES 2016, I talked to some of the 3D printer manufacturers and some of the 3D printing services, and I asked them, kind of off the cuff, can you do medical grade implant prints? And the answer was actually yes. They could do grade 5 titanium medical grade implants. So I could design something, maybe a compass or whatever, and have them print me a case in titanium that seals up somehow, and it would have all the rounded corners. It'd be however I designed it, and they would send it to me, charge me an arm and a leg, but it's better than losing an arm and a leg in the process. They would send it to me, and I would have a implant grade casing.
So when you've gotten your implants done, you've gone to a piercer, correct?
Every single time. I won't. Some people have tried to do this. Some people have successfully done this at home. Some people have successfully done it at home by themselves, but I always go to a piercer.
Why is that?
Well, I'm a fainter, apparently. The very first implant I got was the magnet in my ring finger, and still my favorite. So I got the implant, not a big deal. The pain was significant, but got through it. Afterward, I was washing my hands in just a bathroom with some fragrance-free soap. While I was washing over my hands very thoroughly, I finally felt the magnet under my skin. And that's when my body just went, "You've been invaded. Your body is no longer what I expected to feel there." And I knew I needed to sit down, so I started making my way toward the waiting area, which had a nice soft couch. And the next thing I knew, there was people gathered around holding my face on this nice soft couch, and I had passed out like a sack of potatoes, fallen down, smacked my face on the concrete, and I still have a scar on my chin where I fell. So I went in that day, got my implant, got 3 stitches in my finger, and then I got 5 more stitches in my chin from the piercer who stitched me up before I left. So that is why I always go to a piercer, and my piercer has amazing bedside manners. Now, Tim, you also go to a piercer for your implants.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular reason you always go to one?
Well, it's mainly for the experience. I mean, I feel like I may be able to do a mediocre job at this myself.
I know I couldn't.
If it's on my left hand, I may be able to do it. But my piercer, he's done these implants for I think 20 years. And he hasn't always done the technological implants, not the microchips or magnets necessarily. But for body modification purposes, I would suspect he's done more implants than most doctors because he's just been in the business for that long. He's very conscious of sterilization, and his bedside manner and his nerves he's done it so many times that there's just no problem. While I feel like I may be able to get the job done, I would be a hack compared to somebody like that. So I always go in, and it costs extra, but it's worth the cost in my eyes.
I agree with that. The cost of an infection, of course, is going to be terrible. Even if you have insurance, you're going to have to spend time in a hospital, which is never fun. You might have to spend a night in a hospital, which is crazy, stupid expensive, at least in America. But, not everyone can get to a piercer. Some people do have to do it at home, and, there's a history of it.
Right.
And I wouldn't discourage people from getting an implant just because there isn't one available.
No, I agree with you, but I think it's important, especially when you're doing this at home, to have everything entirely sterile and have a sterile environment, have somebody with you.
Definitely have a spotter.
It just makes sense to have that. The potential for the risk of having an infection or not being able to follow through with it once you've started, things like that there's things you can't predict. And it's important to be very, very careful.
And preparation is going to be what saves you. If you have to answer any question with a guess, you are not prepared for this. There are procedures on biohack.me that give you a pretty good idea of how to do this safely. If you read all those and still have questions, then ask them. But never just go, "I wonder if this is good enough," and then go for it. Do not do that. If you just grab isopropyl alcohol and say, "This can sterilize things, right? I assume it can." No, it can't. Don't do that.
See, that's some of the stuff that really you gotta be aware of, because most people assume that you can sterilize with normal disinfectants, which is 2 very different things. Sterilization is very different, and there's always the chance, and where you get the worst problems is there are molds and funguses that are out there. There are spores that can get in, and they can actually start eating your skin. And something like that is very hard to treat. Doesn't respond to typical antibiotics and things like that. It's just not something to toy with at all.
To be honest, I haven't heard of many horror stories. Most of the people who are on the forum I'm on, the one biohack.me, where they have these procedures, the people who follow those procedures do very well. The worst case they usually say is, I didn't put it in deep enough, and then the magnet rejects. It just pops out with, some pain, but they don't get an infection. It doesn't get in there and they seal a bunch of bacteria in there. The horror stories are not horrible.
So far.
Given enough time.
Give it enough time and enough people that try something they shouldn't, you'll end up with something pretty gruesome.
Yep.
All right, so I think that's that. I think we can wrap it up with that, Brian.
I think so.
All right, well, I'd like to thank our listeners for listening, and we'd like to invite you to email us at 2xcbmic@twincitiesplus.org with any questions, comments, suggestions, hate mail.
Don't send us hate mail.
Don't send us hate mail.
Our bi-weekly thanks to Zach Dolan, who created the awesome cover art for our podcast. I'm the good-looking guy on the left. This is Brian McAvoy.
And this is Tim Shank. Please join us next time when we'll talk about human technological interfaces.
With all the do-it-yourself electronics, we can convert just about any input to just about any output.
You have been listening to Two Cyborgs and a Microphone, brought to you by Twin Cities Plus, creating an intelligent, capable, and resilient community. Good idea, Brian. Good idea. Yeah.